Welcome back. Today we're making this beautiful white drip cake. Now I've shared drip cake tutorials in the past, but I wanted to share this particular one today because a lot of people struggle getting a truly white drip. So I'm going to walk through all my tips and tricks on how to get that nice, beautiful, bright color, along with making perfect drips around your cake. The first step is to make our cake batter. We're going to combine our dry ingredients, which include all-purpose flour, granulated sugar, baking powder, and salt. Once those are whisked together, we're going to slowly incorporate some chunks of unsalted butter that's at room temperature. So the mixture should look kind of like wet sand at this stage, and then we're going to add in our egg whites. We're going to mix on a low speed here, and the batter should start to get really thick. Then we're going to thin it out with our remaining ingredients, which include our sour cream, our vegetable oil, and our vanilla extract. We're going to mix on a medium speed here until the batter looks nice and smooth and everything is incorporated together. If you see any bits of butter or flour along the side of the bowl, scrape around the sides and bottom just to make sure that everything is properly combined. Then we're going to pour them into our prepared 6-inch cake pans. I'm using 3 here. You can also make 2 8-inch cake pans, and we're going to bake them in the oven at 350 degrees for about 36 minutes. So while our cake layer is baking cool, we're going to work on our buttercream frosting. So this is just a small batch version of my American vanilla buttercream. You can use a different type if you prefer a slightly less sweet frosting, but I love eating American buttercream, so that's what we're sticking with today. We're gonna start by creaming together our room temperature unsalted butter, and once it looks nice and smooth like this, we're gonna add in our vanilla extract and our salt. We're gonna mix on a low speed until that's combined, and then it's time for the messy part. We're gonna very slowly incorporate our powdered sugar into the mix. Now I like to just slowly pour a bag straight in, and I usually weigh my bag before so I know that I'm adding in the proper amount. My advice, if you find that you have a lot of powdered sugar clouds coming out of your mixer, is to drape a kitchen towel over your mixer just to help prevent that powdered sugar from going all over your kitchen. I like to add in my heavy cream about halfway through making my frosting just to make it easier to mix. And then we're going to continue to mix on low and add in the rest of our powdered sugar until our frosting looks beautiful and smooth, just like this. If you feel like your frosting is a little bit too thick, you can always add in some more heavy cream. I always err on the side of not adding enough because it's easy to add more, but it's a lot harder to get stiff buttercream if your buttercream's already too soft. I swear I could talk about buttercream consistency all day, but I actually have a whole post on it, so if you have any questions or you're not sure what you're really looking for, I'll link it above. So now that our buttercream is all ready to go and our cake layers are cooled, we're gonna level our cake layers. I'm just using a serrated knife here, and I like to slowly rotate my cake layer and then work my way into the center to lift off the top. I also chose to trim the sides of the cake a little bit to remove some of that caramelization, which even though I absolutely love the way that caramelization tastes on a cake layer, sometimes, especially on a cake like this where we're going for a really bright white aesthetic, it can kind of take away, so it's totally optional, but I decided to trim off that bit. Next, it's time for the best part, assembling this cake. So we're stacking our cake layers on a grease-proof cake board. I'm using an 8-inch reusable cake disc. It's made of acrylic. You can also use a flat plate or a grease-proof 8-inch cardboard cake ground. As we're stacking our cake layers, I'm spreading a nice thick layer of buttercream. You can always add less if you don't like eating quite that much buttercream, but I think you guys all know by now I'm a huge fan of frosting, so I like to add a nice generous layer between my cake layers. Once our cake layers are stacked, we are going to cover the cake in a thin coat of frosting just to trap in any rogue crumbs that might have gotten out as we were spreading our frosting. We're going to smooth it with our bench scraper and clean up those top edges with our small offset spatula, then pop it into the freezer for about 10 minutes until the frosting is firm to the touch. If you don't have a space in your freezer, you can always use your fridge, but it might take about 30 minutes. Then we're going to add on our second thicker layer of frosting, and using the same techniques that we did for our crumb coat, we're going to smooth the sides with our bench scraper and then clean up the edges again with our offset spatula. This process can take up to like 20 minutes. I know the videos make it seem like it's so easy and it happens so quickly, but if you're struggling to get smooth sides on your cake, I have an entire video on that and I'll link it above as well. So once you're happy with how smooth your frosting is, it's time to pop the cake into the freezer one more time before we add on our drips. It's super important that you chill your cake or else your warm ganache can kind of like melt down your frosting, and also your drips won't set properly because the buttercream kind of won't be cold enough to set them into place. So it's super important, and I really recommend for this stage that you do make space in your freezer because the colder your cake is, the better chance you have of having perfect drips. While our cake chills, it's time to make our white chocolate ganache. The first step is to heat up our heavy cream, which I like to do in the microwave. It usually takes about 30 seconds for me. You want it to be steaming and just beginning to boil, but you need to keep an eye on it because it can definitely bubble up and out of your container. If you don't have a microwave, you can also do this on the stovetop. Once your cream is warm enough, you're going to pour it over your white chocolate chips. You can also use white chocolate wafers or white chocolate bars that have been cut up. Just make sure that you're using a good quality white chocolate because it will melt down more smoothly and it'll also taste better. We're gonna kind of swirl around our bowl with our heavy cream and our white chocolate just to make sure that all of it is covered. And we're gonna let it sit for about a minute just to let the heat from the cream slowly melt the white chocolate. We're gonna start to gently stir this, and if you're noticing that maybe your cream wasn't quite warm enough or some of your white chocolate isn't melting down, you can always pop this into the microwave again for about 15 seconds just to help further melt that white chocolate. You're then gonna stir until the white chocolate really seems fully melted and everything comes together, and you're left with a nice, smooth, beautiful white chocolate ganache just like this. Once you're happy with the smoothness of your ganache, it's time to mix in your white gel food coloring. Now there are a lot of different brands out there that make white gel food coloring. Most of them work great. I am using the How to Cake It white gel food coloring today, but Americolor and Chef Master also make fantastic white gel food coloring. But it's super important that you add this because you can see the mixture is a little bit yellow at this stage, and that's totally normal. It's from the cocoa butter that is in white chocolate, but that's not the look that we're going for our white drip cake. So as you can see, mixing this in, it looks so much better and so much brighter with just a little help from that white gel food coloring. So now we're getting to the moment of truth, adding our white chocolate drips to our cake. You can do this in two ways. I usually prefer to use a squirt bottle, just a regular plastic squirt bottle like this. You can get them at Target or Walmart or even on Amazon. They're super cheap, and I think it's a lot easier to add drips around a cake with a squirt bottle. You just have a little bit more control and it's way faster. However, if you don't have one or you don't want to go get one, you can totally use a spoon as well. I would just recommend taking about a teaspoon or two in a small spoon and kind of just pushing it over the edge of the cake and letting it run down. Before you add drips around the entire cake, I highly recommend you do a test drip. You want to find what you think will be the back of your cake, and you want to add 2 or 3 drips and just let them sit for a minute or two and run down the cake. You want to see what they look like and see, are they too thick, are they too thin, did they run too far, are they too short? Because now is the time that you want to adjust your ganache so that you can have perfect drips all the way around your cake. For me, I felt like my ganache was a little bit too thick, and I think it was because it had cooled a little bit while I was filming and setting everything up. So I popped it in the microwave for about 10 seconds, and then I had a really nice consistency that I was able to add around my cake. The other important thing is, once you adjust your ganache, don't immediately cover the entire cake. Do a couple more test strips just to make sure that it is the consistency that you want and the adjustment that you made was right. If you think your drips, however, are too long or too thin, you can always let your ganache cool down a little bit or add in a little bit more white chocolate to thicken it if it looks a little bit thin or streaky. So I have a whole post on that too. I walk through all of my tips and tricks in my blog post for this cake, which is included in the video description below. You can use your remaining white chocolate ganache to cover the top of your cake. I chose not to because I was piping buttercream swirls on top of the cake and I was covering it with sprinkles, so I kind of knew no one was gonna see it. But that's totally an option. If you do that though, make sure that you chill your cake after you cover the top. If you don't and your ganache is still a little bit warm, sometimes as you pipe your rosettes, they can kind of start to slide off your cake, which is not what any of us want after we put this much effort into a cake. So be sure to pop the cake back into the freezer or the fridge just a little bit to help that ganache set up before you pipe on your buttercream swirls. Since I skipped that step, I dove right into my swirls. I'm using an open star tip here. It's a Wilton 1M. I'm just piping some nice little swirls, about 2 passes around for each little swirl. And I'm gonna cover the entire perimeter of my cake, and then I added some kind of festive sprinkles. I was going for kind of a winter vibe here, but I think I ended up with a little bit more New Year's because there's a lot of like gold and silver accents in it. I was so happy with the way this cute little drip cake turned out, and hopefully I've shared everything that you need to know to make a beautiful cake like this at home. And don't forget, the recipe is included in the video description below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and until next time, happy baking!